بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Dear attendees, we are welcoming you to this Naseej Academy webinar, hoping that the knowledge that will be presented will stimulate your ideas and thoughts about assessment. It is another side of dealing with assessment in organization, mainly learning institution, as we had before a webinar about the future assessment in higher education. But today, we will talk about assessment through the learning. The webinar will discuss strategies for developing assessment that are both valid, they measure the right knowledge, skills, competencies, and reliable, they are constant in the measurement to provide stakeholders with the actionable, defensible result for informed decision making. I will not take too much time from you to talk about the topic because our honor guest will take the lead in this. So let me introduce to you our honor guest, Chelsea Dawood, International Strategic Partner Manager at Organization, based in London with global work experience including China, Brazil, and UAE. Extensive experience with include signing up new international clients and onboarding supporting global partners. Chelsea focuses on supporting institutions globally from a variety of sectors such as education, government, manufacturing, and utilities to deliver valid, reliable, and defensible assessment. Please, Chelsea, the virtual floor is yours. And I would like just to announce at the beginning, the questions and all inquiries will be received in written form in the question and answer box. And we will answer it at the end of the webinar. Please, Chelsea, all of us waiting for listening to you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Can I confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. As Dr. Abdullah mentioned, I am Chelsea, the International Strategic Partner Manager. I've been with for around 5 years now, mainly focusing on developing our new partners, and one of our most valued partners within the Middle East region is, of course, Naseej. To start off with a brief background of myself, I studied a Bachelor's of Honours in International Business from Leeds University. Within that, I was able to study abroad. I managed to go to Florida and also to Sao Paulo, Brazil, to, let's say, learning for marketing strategies in emerging countries. After university, I have had a variety of work experience in different countries. I've managed to utilize skills in China and also within the UAE, specifically Abu Dhabi. I've been working in multiple industries, mainly transportation, aviation, automation, and now I'm sort of passionate about technology and how technology can drive the support for change, particularly within the e-assessment space. I was the secretary of the EATP conference committee that took place in London last week, and I'm now the vice chair for the EATP committee for the conference that will take place in Vienna, Austria next year, which is essentially a conference devoted to enhancing the assessment industry.
Perfect.
So to get started with the today, I first wanted to do a quick view of as organization, and then I can dig into the agenda and the strategies that we will be providing and enhancing today. So as an organization was founded in 1988, so we are over 30 years old with a vast amount of clients in industries. So for example, we have 100 universities or higher education using the solution for testing. We also have clients in transportation, in finance, in high tech, in government. So a variety of organizations utilizing our assessment systems to help measure knowledge, skills, abilities, and of employees or students securely for certification, workforce learning, even Salesforce readiness, training, and education. We do take security very seriously at Question Mark. It's something we pride ourselves on as being a highly secure and robust platform. We provide a cloud platform that has 99% uptime. We have many security certifications such as ISO, and we're also FedRAMP approved, which means, for example, the US government has deemed our platform safe and secure enough. But also we have an on-premise platform which really assists with any data residency issues or compliances. And at the core, Question Mark essentially helps you to create, deliver, and analyze in the form of tests, exams, quizzes, and surveys. And what I want to talk to you about today is their best practice when you're creating assessments, and what is at stake when you are creating a testing program. How important is the validity and reliability of your test questions? How do you actually go about implementing or planning an assessment program? How do you then dig deep and measure above knowledge? Because, facts and figures may not be enough to perform a job role effectively. And then also I'll discuss in terms of best practices for creating assessments, but also different models and strategies that can help you to evaluate the learning process. So to begin with, assessments really help you to understand, of course, if your employees are able to do their jobs, etc. And they can really help in many ways of understanding, did they like it? Did your employees like the training course? Did they like the learning? You really can implement, surveys. You can ask for comments throughout assessments to be able to then better assessments in the future. Did they learn it? This is, of course, you as an organization being able to prove that the learning has taken place and that the knowledge has been attained. And for example, by providing regular assessments, you can help reduce the forgetting curve to help continue the learning journey. Can they do it? Now, this is really important because this is really about the actual job performance and the on-the-job skills and abilities. So using, for example, observational assessments, you're really able to understand, can the employees actually conduct the task that they need to within a job role? Also, with regards to, can you prove it? Do you have a robust analytics engine to be able to analyze all of these scores? Do you have the ability to understand where your candidates are effectively performing well? But also on the flip side, I want to dig into statistical analysis today. What tools are available to you to understand how accurate the test questions are and whether you're accurately testing what you're meant to. And this will also relate to reliability and validity that I will also highlight today. And it has many strategic benefits for a university, being able to prove that the students have attained the knowledge from their course so that they can go out into the workplace and the knowledge and skills to be able to tackle their job roles, etc. So this would fall under the measure and learning section. The next part, for example, is being able to train your, whether it's sales staff or whether it's service staff, customer service staff, to prove that they have the appropriate skills to effectively do their jobs. technical verification. This could be very sought after in the high-tech space or industry in general. Also certification, assessment really important in proving that you have specific certifications that can then help you to enroll for specific jobs, enroll for specific learning courses. And of course, regulatory compliance. Now, this is really important in highly regulated industries. For example, banks, for example, oil and gas industry, utilities, because there are very high stakes. Organizations need to prove that their staff are compliant and knowledgeable with necessary laws and regulations. And within this, assessments would obviously help organizations to promote the right people with the right skills. Assessments can also help to be taken pre and post training to prove that the learning was effective. And another key point here is that post-training can really help to understand where you need to reallocate resources. Can you save time and money by redeveloping your training courses, etc. And the ability to ensure job readiness is really key in the recruitment process to make sure that you're hiring the right talent. Mitigating compliance risk really links back to that regulatory compliance piece, whereby, for example, pharmaceutical organizations need to prove that they have the procedures for manufacturing of specific medicines, etc. They need to avoid the risk of any fines or lawsuits by proving that they compliant in all necessary standards, and this can be taken place via assessments. Also aligning competencies with objectives. Now the great thing here is that this can help with developing training programs, and also making informed and defensible decisions can really help HR or hiring managers, make accurate decisions based on real data-driven, which is key nowadays across multiple industries. Stakes in highly regulated industries, but essentially there are many different stakes at play when it comes to assessments. For example, a survey could be considered very low stakes to or more, let's say, tests and exams, the stakes increase. And for example, certifications where there may be a need for proctoring, the stakes are very high because these certifications are presented with certificates at the end, digital badges. So this really does have a long-lasting role within people's personal careers, etc. And there are many different industries where the stakes are very, very high when it comes to assessments. For example, organizations where people's lives may be at risk, whether it's employees out in the field at an oil rig, or whether it's employees who are flying aeroplanes or on the rail tracks, whereby they need to know their job role in detail and all of the processes to make sure that they are avoiding any risk. And on the flip side, there is also the reputation of organizations. Large aviation airlines need to maintain a and don't want to have anything severe to take place, because, for example, there could be pilots that were not properly trained and didn't know how to effectively use an aircraft in the right manner. So that would impact the reputation of the airline, for example. Or whether banks are fined because the customer service of their operators are are not to par and they could be potentially mis-selling some insurance plans, etc. So very, very high stakes where assessments can really help to prove the learning. So in terms of the stakes, as I mentioned, there are many different things to think about with regards to the different industries that could support this. For example, let's think of a workplace assessment. Assessments specifically impact someone's future and their livelihood, supporting their family, for example, if they get promoted or demoted, etc. So the HR has to think of aspects that assessments for pre or post hire have a high in one's entire future. There are three main foundations that help enable best practice assessments. Of course, we have the validity, which essentially is the degree to which evidence and theory support the interpretation of test scores for proposed uses. You also have the aspect of reliability, so the consistency of scores and the reduced measurement error. And then, of course, also something that is a very hot topic within the assessment industry right now, which is very, very important and relevant, is the aspect of fairness. How can you create fair and equitable treatment for all individuals and all test takers, whether it be, the difference of language or location, internet connectivity. Many things impact fairness, so it's something that's really important that needs to be focused on. We want to make sure that our testers do not have any disadvantages because of specific characteristics within an assessment, and also that we are not giving a higher advantage to some individuals as well. So we will dig into these now in a bit more detail. But essentially, you really need assessments that are valid and reliable. So reliability is all about the consistency of your results and your data. Are the assessment questions defendable and are they repeatable? So can you continuously conduct assessments in this manner? And then validity is really important because it ensures the appropriate knowledge and skills to make sure that you're testing the accurate and correct knowledge. So for example, if we look at the first dartboard here, you can see that an assessment can be very reliable because it may be very consistent with its questions, but it may not be valid because let's say we're trying to aim for this bullseye here. Maybe it's not testing things that are relevant to the subject at hand. On the other hand, you could have an assessment that is not reliable or valid, so your results are going to be scattered and it will be a very different experience for all test takers, and you won't be able to replicate this on future training courses. Now, the key sweet spot will be to have a reliable and a valid assessment so that you hit that bullseye by having a consistent set of assessment questions, consistent results that are accurately testing what they're meant to. So this would be the ideal, to have a valid and a reliable assessment. But how do we actually get there? What do we need to do in order to create a valid and reliable assessment? So Question Mark has worked with many, many clients. We have around 600 active customers right now using us to develop assessments. Now, something that we see replicated amongst our customers when they are creating a new assessment program is a development process that looks a bit similar to this. So, of course, you would first have to plan the test. What is the test that you're wanting to conduct? Who are you testing and why? Is it students? Is it employees, etc.? Then you would need to author your items. So you actually need to obviously create the assessment, test questions. Then you need to actually assemble the full assessment. You need to decide what your time limit will be, if you will allow anyone to resit, etc. What will your cut score be? How do they pass or fail? And then most of our clients conduct a POC or a pilot, which really then gives the chance for subject matter experts to review the assessment to make sure that it is valid and reliable. Then you would deliver your assessment on a mass scale, of course, and then analyze the results. So to start with the planning, you really need to understand the purpose of your test. So for example, why are you creating a test program in the first place? You know, why are you delivering this test? Is it to understand employee competency? Is it to understand student knowledge? Or is it to understand something to do with employees learning from the training program? And sometimes this can be, for example, norm referenced or criterion referenced assessments. Now, typically, question mark users tend to veer towards the norm referenced assessment. However, you know, there are multiple reasons at play. Then you need to decide what you're testing. So what construct or domain is being measured? Is it skill? Is it competency? Is it the ability to understand an employee handbook, for example? And then who are you testing? Sorry, 1 second, I'll just have some water. And also what issues of fairness are important? For example, are we testing everyone in English? Shall we test everyone in Arabic? You know, how do we actually help promote fairness? Now, something that's really interesting, a quick fact about question mark, is that we have actually recently created an on-fly instant translate tool, which aims to positively impact the fairness of tests that are taken in a non-native language. So for example, you and I may take the same test. I am not native in Arabic, you may not be native in English, so we can both receive within our test online a support tool that we can highlight any part of the question and it will automatically translate into our desired language of choice. Now, this is a really interesting tool that we actually won an innovation award for in partnership with our clients SAP. And essentially this really helps because it gives the test taker the ability to translate if they aren't taking the test in their native language. It can support, it can reduce stress and bias, etc. Then we need to think about how we will test. You know, what will be the consequences if you pass or fail? How do we determine these scores, for example? So lots of different things to think about. So the next part, once we assessment, we need to look at the content that will be based in the assessment. So for example, is it an end of course test to your students whereby you derive the test content from the course topics and goals? Does this align with what you've been teaching within the class? You could also, for example, have placement tests. Is this derived from entry-level knowledge and skills? Does it match up with a job specification for recruitment? And with regards to certification or employment tests, is there a need for job task analysis, which I will dig into in a bit more detail shortly? And essentially, in order to successfully achieve a specific test plan, you may need to develop a blueprint where you outline the test content. So this will include what you want to be added to the test and also what you need to not include in the test. Then you often have a series of objectives and a weighting, e.g. a score. And this may include key knowledge or specific skills to include. For example, if it's a maths assessment, we will have a lot of equations. If it's a science assessment, we will have chemical formulas, etc. I mentioned task analysis on the previous slide, and essentially this is a way in which you can identify different tasks and behaviors. You can identify conditions or knowledge and skills that are required. So this is really important for understanding what you should put into a test. So for example, an example method could be to create a panel of experts to explain the job role, and also a panel of stakeholders or management to define expectations. And then you could maybe interview all of these experts and stakeholders to understand what is done within the job, what tasks does this person have to do, why is it done, and why is it important. Then you could attend the survey if there are any trends, etc. So here we have on screen an example of a job task analysis, and this can really help with the creation of an assessment, creating a job task analysis to determine the content of a test or a test blueprint. So for example, you can have on screen here the ability to ask the role or region of a specific candidate. You can understand how difficult a job role is, how important it is, and how frequent it is. So I actually wanted to provide a quick demo on the question mark platform just to show you what a sample job task analysis looks like. So here you have the question mark portal. This is the Naseej tailored portal with their logo, etc. So we can log in here as a test taker and take a job task analysis. So here I have a job task and select my location. So for example, Miami, and my job, let's say customer care. And then we do analysis. We have different tasks down the left, and then we have applicability of that task, the tips, and we can go across each and say if it is a difficult, if it is an important task, and how to conduct that task. Then we can go on to the next tasks, such as delivering presentations. We can say we need to do it's very important that we do weekly, and we can go through and all different tasks. Then we can submit, and we can see, for example, that we haven't finished all of the tasks, but at the end we can, create some tailored feedback there. So this is really interesting to be able to gather the feedback of your subject matter experts. Then question mark has actually designed 2 specific reports to analyze the results of these documents. So for example, we can see the different ratios that each people have voted. And also we can see a demographic report, which lets me know, for example, how many managers thought that this task was difficult versus how many medical staff here. So this is really interesting because you can also compare job roles within the same test and you can even the extra. So then once you have conducted the job task analysis, the next thing you would do is look at the content validity review. So as we mentioned before, we could create a panel of 3 to 5 judges or experts, and these experts would ask questions such as, does the content accurately reflect the skills, abilities for this job? Are the items technically accurate and sound? And for example, are the items congruent with the objectives? And then after this, we can evaluate, we can give the opinions, etc. Now, another way that you can analyze item or question statistics is by using item analysis, for example. So Question Marks created an interesting report whereby it removes the need for an in-house psychometrician. It really supports with understanding if your questions are accurately testing what they're meant to. And it also really helps with comparing the difficulty index against the correlation discrimination. So you can see all of the metadata and statistics against specific again show a used to create the in the psychometrics and statistical analysis of test creation. So if I just move on to the question mark reports here, we have dashboards that you can create in the system to understand how many users have created or conducted tests. You can see your active groups, etc. You can also see in terms of outcomes how many candidates have passed or failed an assessment throughout the whole system. But what you can also do is develop deep reports. So what I want to show you here is the item analysis report. So like I said, this is a classical test theory psychometric analysis of performance. So we would very simply select the assessment and you can pull it out into HTML, PDF, CSV, Excel, etc. And I'll just wait while this is being generated. And I'll just move the Q&A. And what we can see here is a scatter plot diagram. And basically, each square represents a different question within one assessment. And it works like a traffic light. So essentially, everything in green is performing well, and everything in red is performing poorly. And this is a really important sort of psychometric analysis that can help understand if the content is accurately and accurately performing valid questions. So we can see here that performing very badly. So what can we see is a list of different questions. We can click to C21 and essentially we can see the preview of the question, we can see the metadata of the question, and we can also get a description that is automatically generated from the system itself. And just to keep it super quick and high level, we can basically, one thing that we can see is that this third answer must, nobody at all out of 890 students ever selected this response, which means this is an a bad response, it is bringing down the validity of the test because it's turning a 1 in 3 into a 50-50, so it isn't a reliable question. So we could then ask for our subject matter expert or our trainers to delete this question, for example. And what you could also do is ask them to edit the response, to maybe change the wording because it's not accurate at the moment and it's bringing down the overall validity of our questions. So that's just a quick insight into different psychometric analyses that can be created online. The next part of the talk today is really going to be about measuring above knowledge. So we've just covered the planning process, how to create tests, how to input a test blueprint, what you should think about. But now I really want to focus on measuring above knowledge, because of course there are lots of different things to think about, because knowledge and facts are not enough to understand if someone's ability to conduct a task is good enough. For example, we need to understand if they have the appropriate skills, if they have the abilities, whether it's technical abilities, etc. So it's a combination of all of these things, not just the knowledge that inputs one's ability to conduct a task. So I have a little case study here for you, and this is basically a case study to do with a client of question marks that was presented at one of our previous conferences. Now, this specific organization was an insurance claims examiner, so in the insurance space, and they had employees that had billable hours. So they needed to figure out, for example, if they could spend time on testing or whether testing all of their staff was wasting time. So, for example, they needed to investigate if their employees could settle claims. They needed to see if they could adjust recommendations to clients. They needed to see if their employees could resolve complex claims. They needed to understand if they could pay and process, etc. So this was really going beyond textbook knowledge, and this was understanding if they actually had the skills and abilities to conduct the task. So for example, did they have proficiency in the English language? Did they understand government regulations, etc.? Could they also read, write, and critical think? And did they have the skills? And then in terms of abilities, could they actually express the needs to customers correctly? Did they have customer service communication skills, etc.? Now, typically you need to understand how to measure competency. So this is the ability to actually conduct tasks. Like I said, it's going beyond the knowledge. So for example, you want to go beyond the knowledge, which is the memory, and you want to go above the skills. So you need to look at comprehension, application, analysis, and evaluation. You also need to look at observable skills of students or employees. Can they actually conduct tasks? And also the attitudes of specific students, their motivations, or does your employee fit within the team culture, etc. So we have a variety of, textbook advice. So essentially what I have on screen here is a textbook criterion referenced test development up here, written by William and Sharon. And the summary is basically covering going beyond knowledge, because you may be thinking, how do we create this sort of test? So in this book, they explain that the knowledge is the easiest part of the test to write, and that it's actually developing the test with the on-the-job training that requires more focus. So this is the hardest part, is to look at the competency. Now, in general, the single most improvement you can make a test to write a memory, so go beyond knowledge. So we have knowledge here, and we have on the task to task and analyze and then create themselves. So here we present to you some approaches or strategies to help test higher level skills that go beyond the knowledge. So firstly, you could, for example, write conventional questions to go beyond recall. So go beyond multiple choice by potentially presenting matching questions, ranking questions, drag and drop, hotspot, that keep it more interactive for the candidate. The second approach could be observational assessments and performing actual tasks. So an observer would watch someone performing a skill and they would answer about their efficiency and ability to conduct a task. The third option is for the creation of situational judgment tests. So this is where you would add a case study or a dilemma to the candidate, and then you would have to see how they would solve that case study. So now I'm going to dig into each of these 3 points to give a bit more information on how to create a strategy. Writing questions. In order to create this method, you could, for example, create questions that requires a participant to consider multiple facts. So rather than having one correct answer, you could ask them to select multiple correct answers. You could also add a case study into your question, or a video, for example, that makes it look like a real life work scenario that the employee would have to solve. You could also create a task, so include a question that requires analysis, add charts, tables, images, maybe a sound file for them to listen to. And then the second point that I mentioned was observational assessments. Now, a lot of our clients use this when they have, for example, employees that are out in the field, whether they are on an oil rig, making sure they can accurately conduct specific machinery. But also we have some financial clients in a bank that use us for observational tests to understand whether their customer service representatives are talking correctly on the phone to clients, and that they are accurately selling the right credit cards or the right insurance plans, etc. So this really helps to understand whether a candidate can perform a task, whether they can actually conduct because it enforces consistent ratings so that you have the reduction of bias. It also helps streamline and centralize the scores so that everyone can be at a fair advantage. The third one is situational judgment questions. So I wanted to quickly show you today an example of a situational judgment test that we have created. So if I just move back to my screen here, we have a situational judgment test whereby you can add some instructions to your candidates. You can also add with an assessment navigator to show how many questions they have to answer. You can even add calculators, and we can go through and read the specific case study to see how we would answer. What you could also do, like I mentioned in the previous point, is add a video here or add images so that your employees find the assessment more interactive. We can highlight a question and come back to it, etc. Or we can just finish the exam. And you can decide if you want to give your candidates feedback or not. Now, the final point on this section that I wanted to discuss was a model from the Performance Testing Council here. And essentially this provides a large scope. You have from the bottom here, the model alignment talks about blue or guilt process. You then up and analysis techniques, job type display. You then can understand the level of validity, knowledge and form, and then also to understand the item types. An item is another word for question. You know, are you using your multiple choice? Are you using scenarios? Or is it a more of a live environment like an observational assessment that I mentioned? So there are many different strategies here to go beyond the multiple choice. For example, the observational assessments, etc. So this I thought was a really interesting model to bring up to help assist you in measuring beyond knowledge. Now we have another case study in a bit more detail of the customer that I mentioned previously, the client that has an employee count that has billable hours, and they were basically trying to understand if getting their employees to take a test costed them time and money. So essentially what they did was they created a pre and a post test to understand the net level of knowledge that employees had before they went into the training course. So they used these pre-tests to understand if the employees needed to go and conduct the training course or not. And if they got a specific score, they didn't need to spend time conducting the training. So what they found was that, you know, they had, for example, 1,000 people, and if there was no testing to take place, it would be 2,000 hours. What they did was they then asked everyone to take a 20-minute test, and from that they decided that 25% of people passed and didn't need to take the training, and that it was 75% of people that needed to take the training. So they deducted, found out they actually saved time and into the training. And then from this, you could develop reports and employees' key strengths and weaknesses and really spot areas for further learning. And this is really useful because essentially it would help you to understand not all of your employees would need to take the same training course. Some people have different levels of skill, so they may not always need to be eligible for the training. And that can really help you with saving time if you conduct a pre-test to make sure they're eligible. So this specific client used to do 3 different tests, which took a lot of time and effort from the employees. So there was time wasted and it costed a lot. Whereas they've then maneuvered to creating a more tailored test approach, a more adaptive style testing that looks a bit like this. So they use jump blocks and branching to create an adaptive test, which basically guides the learner through the test based on their scores. So it creates a tailored pathway. So for example, there are 10 questions in part of the test. If you score less than 80%, you'll be jumped to course B, which potentially has easier questions. But if you score above 80, you would then go and stay within course A that has some harder questions, for example. And this is really interesting because it really helps you make a tailored testing program quick and easy. Now, the next thing to talk about is the lessons learned from this client. So they use the item analysis report to quickly spot and delete problematic questions. They then demonstrated the reliability of the test with that report to their management. And, you know, some clients can even use these reports as defensibility in court, for example. And then there is also the potential for creating shorter tests to save time and money using adaptive testing to save time and money. So now we have a live poll, and I would like you to put in the chat A, B, C, D, or E of your opinion of which you think is the most appropriate pass score for a test. Should you put 70% pass? Select A. If you think 80% pass, type in B. If you think 90% should be the pass rate, type C. And enter D if you think 100% should be the pass rate. Or you can add E if you think it depends on how difficult each of the questions are in the test. Great, so we're getting a lot of different comments here, some A's, some D's, 70%, something 90. This is really great. Very interesting. And another webinar that we also provide is how to set accurate cut scores. So that could be useful. And yes, there are a lot of E's. Well done, everybody. The question E is correct because it depends on the difficulty in typical circumstances. So congratulations. And a way to present difficult questions can be utilized in question mark using meta tagging. So this is a really great way to categorize your questions based upon the difficulty or Bloom's taxonomy. For example, we can select the difficulty level of easy, high, etc. So well done, everybody that selected E. It is a very interesting question because you know, there are a lot of scores that could be the pass rate, but it really does depend on how difficult the questions are, etc. But well done. Now, the main bulk of the webinar that we have left, we're almost at the end, but I just mainly wanted to talk about setting defensible pass-fail scores. So basically we have, you know, it's hard to understand what the score should be. It's risky. Do you guess? Do you have to just roll the dice? So the good practice and how to create a score is, you know, setting a pass score to reflect minimally acceptable competence. So passing the test demonstrates competence. So obviously the lower the score would be, the easier it is to pass, but that means that the competency is an easy task. So the higher the score shows that it's a harder task to have to conduct. So the first method that you could decide is the Anguff method. Now, essentially, it works as, so we will have subject matter experts. Do you think score? And then we'll derive and work it out from there. So the example would be, you know, asking everybody what they think and then working out the average, for example. So that's the Anguff method. The next topic that I want to discuss is the actual assessments and evaluating learning. So the next model is the Kirkpatrick model. Now, a lot of organizations use this and there are different levels. So level 1 is the reaction, and I'll go into a bit more detail soon, but level 2, 3, and 4 all have different aspects. So here you can see the frequency of the reported usage. So we have 5 essentials for high impact learning measurement from the Brendan Hall group. And essentially you can see the different levels here. And the colors reflect the different levels over time. So it's really interesting, and we can dig into this on the next slide. But basically, you can conduct course evaluations, you know, smile sheets. I'm sure you've all seen this before. You know, click the smile if you're happy with how the course was, or the angry face, you know, rating. And this can really help to continuously evolve tests and improve tests. And this is the most common assessment type. And the next part is the example of performance-orientated smile sheets. So you can have a smiley face or an angry face, you know, a smiley face. And how people are finding the topics, etc. And you can put how able are you to put into practice what you learn. And you can ask them to respond accordingly. Now we have a book here as well that talks a lot about this in detail. It is the Performance-Focused Smile Sheet book. Then if we relate to levels 3 and 4 of the Kirkpatrick model, essentially this basically digs into a bit more statistics. So what we have noticed, 32% cited it is difficult to assess an obstacle. So here you have the 32%. But what we really want to look at is in the blue here. 37% of people found difficulty in linking learning to outcomes. You know, why are we testing? did the learning lead to increased sales, etc.? And 44% of people cite the lack of proper metrics. So it's always going to be difficult. There's not one perfect method. You can't always create the most brilliant assessment, but using these different models, it can really help to enhance the performance to the best of your ability. The next thing that we have on screen here is the Brendan Hall Group study, and essentially it is the use of learning metrics measured on a scale of 1 to 4, and basically asking people to, instead of putting smiley faces, you're asking them to rate, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that's also an interesting way to conduct analysis. So course completion, we also have a in-depth understanding with regard to post-course questionnaires, employee satisfaction surveys, things like that. And lastly, we have the learning transfer evaluation model. So this was a model developed from Will, and it basically combines the Bloom's taxonomy, the Kirkpatrick model, quite a few of the other models I've mentioned today. And it basically looked at attendance. So for example, did you attend this webinar today? Then it looks at, were you active? So relating it to all of us, did you vote in the poll? Did you comment? Then it looks at your perception and if you have the correct knowledge, and then also if you can have the decision-making competence, task competence, and then the actual knowledge transfer. So really interesting. You can click the link to understand more about this model. But essentially lots of different models, lots of different ways to create tests. So before we end, I wanted to have one last poll. Do you use any of the models I've mentioned today? So if you don't know, for example, click F. If you don't use any methods, click E in the comment box. If you use a mixture, click D. Do you use smile sheets? Click C. And if you use the Angoff and Kirkpatrick model, A and B. So for example, smile sheets, or is it a mixture? And I hope that if there are any Fs that I have helped to shine a light on some of the potential strategies and procedures that can help enhance the assessment process. And I hope that I've also been able to bring to light some of the psychometric analysis. And I really, really hope that, you've enjoyed the session, that you've learned something from the session, and that it motivates you to maybe look at the way in which you create tests in your organization, etc. So I do just want to say a huge thank you for everyone's contribution, and I'll hand over to see if there are any questions. And thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and we really appreciate smoothly and very easy way that you deliver your message about the assessment, and for sure you got the high marks in the assessment about this webinar. So we give you all the smiling faces, the thumbing up, and everything, as I see here from our audience. So let's go, because the time is always just running with us, to start with the first questions. And again, I am confirming about receiving the question written in question and answer. The first one is about your reflection on the assessment during the COVID-19. And we already now if we will face such a pandemic again through the assessment? Please.
This is a really great question, and it's a very important question because COVID-19 showed us that we always need to be as equipped as possible because anything can happen. And
Yes.
I hope that with the development and enhancement of e-assessment products, this can help continuously test employees or students, and that there needs to be no downtime so that nobody has to struggle, and that you can continuously conduct business processes, etc. And one of the key things that I've learned within the test industry is that, for example, online proctoring has really helped with this because it means that students can take the test within their own home and they don't need to worry about traveling. And, you know, sometimes this can also save time and money for the candidates, for the employees as well. Maybe one time in the future, if I'm honored enough to be back, I could explain a bit about the live proctoring in more detail.
Okay. Very good. So we have another question here. It's about, okay, I'm trying to classify it. Okay. In your opinion, are there difference between the test assessment from region to another, even it is in the same subject specialist?
Great question, and I think this really also relates to fairness. So should we have standardized testing, and should we take a test no matter what country? I think it's really important to have standardized testing to prove the knowledge against everyone, no matter what their background, location, region, etc. And like I said, one way that can assist with this is the translation capabilities, so that candidates can take tests within their own native language, for example.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's something that's really, really interesting and very important to think about.
Sure, yeah, especially because there is another question related to the difference between individuals and how to come up with the assessment that what you can matching with the average between employee or students. So I think this is the opposite of the question, that how to have this medium or in the middle of the things, just away from the very genius or below the average. So how to have this assessment that be very fair and at the same time trying to respect the difference between people.
And I think a great way to be able to tackle this issue is with adaptive testing, so that each candidate receives their own tailored assessment based on their own answers, so that if I am not performing as well in a certain topic, that based on my scores, the test will auto-generate some easier questions if I'm struggling, so that I can go down a different route. But if I'm high performing, I would go on to another block that would have harder questions. So I think this is possible with adaptive testing and the ability of meta tagging to understand and separate easy and hard questions.
Okay. We have another question here. It's about, are there the institutional entities in the Arab region that using the assessment tool, how would the feedback? And there is, he asking about that question mark or any other tool you use it. Is there any Arab countries just use it already, and what was the first the feedback?
Great question. So personally with Question Mark, we have a lot of clients based in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, Egypt, the UAE, using our systems primarily in English and Arabic because we support both. And they use a mixture of methods that I mentioned today. And what's great is that we assist clients in multiple countries, but in different industries. So we can have some universities that use it, and students find this easier when they're taking online tests. But also we have, banking clients that use us, or oil and gas clients that use us. So it really is a broad scale, and we can help no matter what the use case, because it's a blank system where you can input your own content creation based from the methods that I've mentioned today. And one last point to mention is that we really have great tools to help with accessibility, to help with fair testing. So changing, the contrast or the size of the fonts, to really also help with any disadvantages that people may have in different locations.
Perfect. Related to that, they asking about that the percentage of accuracy. Is there a difference if you use it with Arabic language or other non-Arabic language?
Great question. So there are multiple ways to tackle this. We don't have any specific statistics. Earlier I mentioned the instant translate tool that we have brought out. So this is a brand new feature. So we are currently testing and generating the analytics now. And we hope that by December, we'll have some statistics for data-driven representation. But at the moment, we're still quite new with the concept of the on-the-fly testing. But with the manual translation, that is done by the client themselves. So you can input your own questions, and you're in charge of how, accurate the translations are. So you can use either or.
Okay, good. Okay, will you give us more elaboration and clarification on measuring above knowledge? I know you mentioned in one of your slides, so maybe they need to know it in deep a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So the measuring above knowledge is basically, if we start off with just the facts and figures of a specific field or job role, that is the basis. But we need to then be able to prove to our employer that we can actually conduct a task. So I may have the best knowledge in the world about trains, but can I actually sit in a train and conduct and drive? It's a similar aspect to the driving tests that we have. We need to actually get in the car with an observer to pass and get the certificate. We can't just take the test on its own. In the UK specifically, it may be different in other regions, but Question Mark actually works with a lot of driving license organizations where we provide the paper or the online physical tests and the simulation tests, but then the client still has to have the observational test to get their ID.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so we have a question here from Mr. Hamad. He said that, Hamad, how about preparation and prerequisites to build the assessment? And are there special advice in this regards? I think he's talking about that before starting thinking about this. What do you advise him?
Yeah, definitely. So with specific preparation, that relates to the first slide I showed in terms of understanding who you're testing, why you're testing, and also with the prerequisites, understanding what topics and what knowledge you actually need to provide. So in a way, it's best to think about the end result first. What is the end result? Is it, if I take this test, I get the job, or I'm able to conduct a job? Because then you need to think about the actual tasks. So a lot of the time, an assessment questions could come from a job specification or a job description of all of the tasks that would be successful in achieving a role.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much for this telegraphic answer, because we have many questions. How about protect the quizzes and the questions from exposing, especially if you're talking about something remotely?
Makes sense. If this is to do with, you know, content theft and content harvesting, which was obviously huge and really came to light in terms of cheating, there are multiple ways that you can reduce cheating. Specifically with the question mark system, we have a lockdown browser, which means that when you're taking the test, you can't open any other browsers, you can't Google any answers, you can't click on WhatsApp or Teams with your friends and ask them the question. You're completely locked on this screen. And also there is, which is a really key thing, the aspect of randomization. So randomizing the question order, randomizing the response order, and also randomly selecting which questions are presented to different people.
Perfect. Okay, back, and this is in Arabic. Okay, he's saying that, okay, what is the methods for assessment that helps in measuring the skills or talents?
Great question. So I'd say the best type of assessment for skills and actual abilities and talents is the on-the-job assessments. So this was basically to do with the observational. So when you actually have a observer monitoring you conducting specific tasks live, this is the best way to prove that you can actually conduct a job performance or a skill accurately.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, there is two more questions. We will take it. I know that we have many other questions, but we will get it over the email because we need to respect your time. Chelsea, there is a question about the Kirkpatrick model, and if you would like just to give more elaboration and clarification about especially the levels of it, just in brief.
Yeah, definitely. So what I can do is I'll just quickly put it back on the screen here.
Yeah, it's good.
And essentially it basically talks, I'll just get it up. It basically talks about the different levels. So level 1 is all about the reaction towards an assessment. Level 2 is about the actual learning. Level 3 is more about the behavior and actually conducting tasks and skills. And then obviously you have the level 4, the results there. So we can, I'm guessing, can we send slides to people where they can then see that I dig into the different levels here. So for example, the levels here we have 3 and 4, etc. It gives reasons as to, you know, why some levels are not applicable, but also a link that I've linked about the Kirkpatrick model to give a high-level overview. It's a quick study that you can read, and it is really a really useful model.
Okay, thank you so much. And they can read more about this model. The last question is about this evaluation done every month or every year or every quarter. And they asking which is better for the institutional entity to do such assessment, in your opinion?
So typically I would say that continuous testing is the best method because you're continuously checking and assessing the knowledge and skills. And it's also relating to the forgetting curve. So if you Google forgetting curve, you'll be able to see the graph where essentially the more often that you take tests and learn, it reduces the forgetting curve. So you're more likely to constantly be up to date with the knowledge in your mind because you're constantly bringing it to the forefront when you conduct tests. So definitely more often. And one last point with that is I think it is also useful to do pre and post test before the learning to understand how they were. And if you conduct a test after, you can actually prove if the learning has taken place. And this also helps from an instructor or administration point because you can then tailor your course in the future if you need to focus on different topics that people may not have passed in the last test. it can help you to reallocate training efforts.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and I do apologize for the rest of the questions that we have because we're trying to stick to our time, even we can see that we exceed the time. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for this impressive and outstanding presentation and the way that you deliver your message about the assessment. Thank you so much, and for sure we'll be happy to have you again in another topic. As we see, there is many thumb up and hearts, please. So that's reflecting that for our attendees had a good feedback about what they learned this night. Thank you so much for you. Thank you for our attendees, and we confirm that we'll send you the certificate about attending, and also after we have the permission from Chelsea, we will upload the presentation on Nasij Academy. So thank you so much, and I will leave the last word to close this webinar for you, as you are our honor guest. Please, Chelsea.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you everyone for attending. I hope you found this insightful and that you can maybe replicate some of these methods or strategies internally. It really was an honor to be able to speak to you today, and I really hope we can speak again soon.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank my colleagues and Mr. Salah for the translation. And we are inviting you to follow our events in Nasij Academy. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.